Call to order the Lake Mills City Council for January 21st, 2020. Roll call, please.
Ms. Schmidt?
Here.
Mr. Fields?
Here.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Here.
Mr. Foster?
Here.
Mr. Fritsch?
Here.
If all who are able would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 4, correction and/or approval of the City Council minutes of January 7th, 2020. Is there a motion to approve?
I move the approval of the city council minutes of January 7th, 2020.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as they were received by us? Seeing none, call the question on that? Called.
Mr.
Roll.
Fritsch?
Aye. Oh, Mr. Fritsch, sorry.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch?
There we go. Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Okay. Correspondence. Anybody have anything to report? Quiet because of the holidays, I think, and the cold weather and all the other things. Nothing from staff at this point, so, okay. Item number 6, questions and public comment. Okay. The public is encouraged to address the council at this time regarding items on the agenda. Public comment may also be made at this time on items that are not on the agenda if you have registered with the city clerk before the meeting has been called to order. The state's open meeting law discourages action by the council on items not listed on the agenda. Please keep your comments limited to 3 minutes and state your name and address when starting your comments, and fill out the sign-in sheet provided on the podium when you are finished. All right.
Hi, I'm Robin. I'm with the Lake Mills Ashland Historical Society as well as the Lake Mills Preservation Guild. I am a town resident. As a representative of these two groups, I want to recognize the significance of what the Phase 2 report shows us regarding Sandy Beach, which Heritage, or the Commonwealth Heritage Group, I believe the name is, will be presenting later. We as a small community potentially have a prehistoric site that has some significance, not just on a local level, but on a national level. And as a small community, we have only a handful of opportunities to have that kind of recognition. I encourage the council to become good stewards of this potential heritage site, and I see the potential and hopefully see the potential of the economic and educational impact the recognition could have. In reading the report, I have to say I support the recommendations given by Commonwealth, and I am looking forward to hopefully having another historic site to add to our community. Thank you.
Did you get a chance to sign in? Okay, thank you very much for coming and for signing in.
My name is Melissa Fearman. I live at 225 Circle Drive in Lake Mills, Wisconsin. I'm here because I wanted to talk to you about Sandy Beach and all the proposals for it. This past September, my 10-year-old daughter and I went to Sandy Beach twice during the archaeological dig to see the process and what was being found. It was quite an amazing experience, learning that there are people here on the shores of the lake that we love that predate the people of Aztalan. We were very excited to hear about their findings. Unfortunately, my daughter's homesick tonight, so I'll have to tell her everything I learned. I've been enjoying Rock Lake and Sandy Beach my entire life. I lifeguarded at the beach for 2 summers, and I've spent most of my time as both an adult and a child at the beach and on the shores here of Rock Lake. I've been thinking a lot about this project since it was first presented by the consultants a few years ago. I'm wondering, what are we doing? Why are we going to tear up a beautiful beach and park area? Why are we going to cut down magnificent trees that are homes to many different types of animals? I don't see the point in changing the beach. I heard a consultant say at one of the first presentations that these changes will make us more like Lake Geneva. Well, I don't want to be Lake Geneva. I want to be Lake Mills, and I'm sure there are others that feel the same way. I've heard concerns for safety at the boat launch at meetings, and I'm wondering, could there be a less intrusive way to address those concerns? Maybe a crosswalk with a similar light to what's at the middle school on Madison Street, keeping the boat launch where it is. To me, that would be less invasive and less expensive. I've heard that the restaurant building isn't to code and is in need of major repairs. Okay, could we do something smaller than the proposed structure? Could we build on the same footprint to help keep the beach the way it is? I hope the City Council knows that many people love the beach the way it is. I'm asking the City Council, when you're looking at the proposals and phases for the Sandy Beach area, please remember that this is a well-used, well-loved beach, and not everyone wants to see the changes that are being proposed. There is no rush to make a decision. Please be thoughtful, visit the beach during all seasons, and seek input from the public. If we dig up the land, cut down the trees, those things can't be undone. We have an amazing area at Sandy Beach, and now with the archaeological finds, it has an even richer history. Thank you.
Thank you for coming to speak to us. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the council at this time? Seeing no one else, we'll close public comment and move on to item 7, the city manager's report.
Dan and I are gearing up to do the presentation at the Wisconsin City Managers Association on social media. Dan's actually prepared an outline. The fire department has presented us with an intergovernmental agreement with Watertown and Johnson Creek. We are meeting with a new medical director later in the month, next week. South Main Street, we're gearing up for bidding out the work on the trees. There are going to need to be some signs that get moved, so signs that were just placed will probably be moved again. But the Parks Department's going to try and work with that and their placing of the trees. And the public information meeting will probably start being advertised here shortly. Department of Transportation has set a date, and they'll start gearing up for that on the south when they start the south side. We have reapplied for the TAP grant. We had applied for that 2 years ago. What we applied for was a sidewalk along Tyranita Park Road from Topeka to East Mills. They called us and said they wanted us to reapply. So we have decided to reapply. The Parks Board has approved a new comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. It'll have to go to the Plan Commission and the City Council before it's finalized and sent on to the state, so you'll probably be seeing that shortly. I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, we authorized a lease with AT&T for some ground in the back here. They started their environmental work to put up the tower. The Christmas tree or the Christmas lights that go around the downtown, while they need to be changed, with a few minor pole modifications, we can make them work in all the poles that are out there. So it's not as bad as we originally had anticipated. The library is in the midst of a study, and you guys probably know that. But they will have a lot of people in for focus groups that are going to be done here shortly, so you may be asked to be a part of that. As far as the MI meters, we have about 2,000 electric in and about 1,500 water. So that's moving forward. Should be done sometime this summer. There are several areas where we're looking at new streetlights. There have been some intersections added and some streets added or changed, and so new streetlights are going to be coming forward, so we'll have to move that proposal forward. We received notice that we are getting an electric billing audit. That's done in like every 5 years, so we hit the 5-year number. So there are a bunch of questions that Betsy has to fill out, send in. The electric that we were doing at Brookstone is done. We're getting ready to send the final special assessment numbers out to the developers on that. And that's pretty much it. Any questions?
What kind of modifications for the Christmas decorations on the poles? Sounded last time like it was.
Yeah, the last time we thought that they wouldn't be able to be used, that we'd have to trade them out with some of the poles that we have in the back here, but that's not true. We'll be able to use the existing poles. They actually have the outlets in them. They just weren't wired, so the guys are gonna have to go in and wire them. And then have to put in a ring on them where you clamp the street lights on, or the Christmas lights. So a few modifications, but nothing significant like we had originally thought.
Is it gonna cost very much?
The new lights probably will. We needed to do new lights anyways, but they'll probably be expensive, from what I could tell.
So if we reapply for that TAP grant, how much of that how much of that whole program be paid for if we're going from, all the way from Topeka to Grant?
80%. And it's from Topeka to East Mills.
Oh, East Mills.
Yeah, not Grant. And there was some question there. Our original proposal was under $200,000, which gave us a lower score. The new one, they're looking at $300,000, so, but they told us to apply anyways. And we said, well, there's some areas we could add too if it's worthwhile, because we're already looking at spending the money up there 100% anyway, so taking that money and applying it to the 20% should be beneficial, and we get a lot more coverage, but I guess we'll see what happens. We're still working through the initial grant application.
Who provides that?
Wisconsin Department of Transportation.
Is it DOT?
It's a federal program. That's why it's an 80-20, and actually the state covers 10, we cover 10, and the feds cover 80.
Yeah.
The fact that they asked us to reapply, does that mean we have a good chance of?
Yes.
Why do I remember the tower was going to be Verizon and not AT&T?
I do not know, because it's AT&T.
That's good news for me, but for some reason,
The two have merged now.
oh,
They did? Oh, that I didn't know.
well, maybe that's why.
It was probably originally.
I just remember it that way. I don't know if I'm right or wrong.
No, you're right.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I had.
This year is the year there's going to be work on Highway A going over the interstate, or is that next year?
No, I believe that's this year. And it's most of the overpasses over the interstate are having some level of from in Jefferson County are having some level of repair done to them, which includes a Q, I think O.
Okay.
To the pavement or repainting them or what?
No, it'll be pavement work and structure work under the bottom. It won't be a total rebuild, but it'll be some level of repair to the existing.
Something like we had on 89.
Yes.
And that's the county?
No, that's the state.
The state? Okay, gotcha.
Stop.
All right. Anything else?
I just assume that if they're going to do that much work, that it's going to be a long time before they ever think about moving that,
Yeah.
as we had talked about.
Yeah. They gave us when they started doing this work, we've filed with them to, that we'd like to relocate that street. And they said, probably, you can pay 100% of it now or wait 20 years and then you can pay some minor piece of the overall cost.
And 20 years goes fast.
It does, but there was just another accident up there on Friday night at that intersection, so.
Well, there are things we can do to mitigate some of that.
Yeah.
That wouldn't cost as much as doing, but, yeah, unfortunately, we won't be able to get it.
Fortunately, it's not our
It's
intersection.
not ours, yeah, exactly.
With the overpass work, are they going to be adding cameras up there? I know when they've been redoing overpasses, they've been installing a lot of cameras.
I do not know about that. I know that there's a lot of concrete work and metal work. As far as if they're putting cameras in, I do not know.
Okay. So, if there's nothing else, questions, we'll go on to item 8, the acceptance of the minutes of the Joint Rock Lake Committee of November 5th, 2019, the Zoning Board of Appeals of January 16, 2019. Is that a typo? No, is that back that far, isn't it? Okay. Zoning Board of Appeals of March 6, 2019. Zoning Board of Appeals of September 4th, 2019. And they will be accepted and placed on file. Seems like a long time ago for January. Council business, miscellaneous licenses, would you read those, please?
We just have one, it's for Lisa Christian.
Okay. And,
I'll make a motion to approve the tavern operator license for Lisa Christian.
Second.
have a motion and a second, would you call the roll?
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Fritsch?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
And item number 2, the second-hand jewelry dealer's license for Countryside Jewelry. This is a renewal also.
Correct.
And anybody wish to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the secondhand jewelry dealer license for Countryside Jewelry.
Second.
You get to pick.
I heard Vicky.
Okay. Would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Fritsch?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Discussion and decision on the request from the Lake Mills Area Chamber of Commerce to use the community center for casino night fundraiser. All right.
I move motion 20-1-2-1.
Second.
Any discussion? This is an annual event, so nothing out of the ordinary. Call the roll.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Fritsch?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Okay. Resolution 25, recognition and appreciation of service for Carolyn Way. Would you read that, please?
Resolution 20-5, in appreciation of public service to the city of Lake Mills from Library Assistant Carolyn Way. Whereas Carolyn Way has served many distinguished years with the city of Lake Mills, LD Fargo Public Library, providing the city of Lake Mills with a direction to the right book and serving in many capacities in support of library patrons. And whereas Carolyn Way has devoted numerous hours to providing positive contributions to the LD Fargo Public Library while exhibiting the highest level of loyalty and dedication to the city of Lake Mills. And whereas Carolyn Way's resolute attention to detail, constant professionalism, and ability to understand and respond to the needs of citizens of the city of Lake Mills and patrons of the LD Fargo Public Library have contributed to the betterment of the city of Lake Mills. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Lake Mills does hereby recognize the dedicated public service and career accomplishments of Carolyn Way and extends best wishes for an enjoyable retirement.
If my eyes are, with the lights are staring me in my eyes, but she's not here tonight, so, but she did have a retirement,
Exception.
greeting, meet and greet at the library on Wednesday last week, and there was a nice turnout there, all ages, school age and up, to recognize her work. And she has been a very constant fixture at the library over the years. So, and we will get her plaque to her, right?
And I move resolution 20-5.
Second.
Okay. Is there any other comments regarding Carolyn and her work? We're seeing none, call the roll.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Fritsch?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Thanks, Carolyn. Item D, presentation on Sandy Beach Archeological Report by Commonwealth Heritage Group. And we appreciate you coming tonight. We'll ask you to go to the podium. If you have something you want to get put up there, you can give it to Steve.
I can just talk for the time being. If anybody wants to see any images, I can bring the report over to show. Last fall, we conducted Phase 2 excavations on 2 separate sites at Sandy Beach Park. I'll just take them one at a time. The first one we did was at the west side near the large volleyball courts. We put in several test units, small, basically 1 yard by 2 yard holes in the ground. In 3 out of the 4, we found intact features, which basically, in this case, is old trash pits that they had dug. 2 out of the 3 date to a time period we call the Middle Woodland. It's give or take 2,000 years old. And one of them actually shows some pretty clear evidence for ceremonial ritual activity of some kind. We have items coming from southern Illinois that are usually used in not typically economic contexts. We have a mineral called red ochre that we see for a long time being used in burials and ceremonies and things like that. And then some of the other pottery is atypical for the region and time period, so at least elements of them are. So that's fairly unique and interesting to see. We also have one of our other features looks like it's a little bit later in time, we call the late woodland. That's probably more like 1,500, maybe, or closer to 1,000 years old. And again, there's another small little trash pit associated with that. All across most of the whole site, basically, other than right by the lake, it looks like the whole area was covered by a layer of historic fill, possibly originating from the old ice house that used to be on the site. This actually protected the site pretty well. So all the modern activities that have been happening there have been happening and mostly disturbing the top little bit of the site, not actually going down into the features themselves. So this is help protect things and make them more likely that we'll be able to learn information from the site. Based on our findings, we concluded that the site is potentially eligible for the NRHP, the National Register of Historic Places, which is kind of the benchmark for determining if projects, especially federal projects, going forward, need to have any additional work. And given the integrity of the site, the fact that it's been protected, the time period, and some of the activities that we're seeing, we're recommending that that site move forward to a Phase 3 excavation. The other site, which is closer to the current boat launch, we put in 3 smaller units. 2 of them had archaeological materials, but no intact features. The third one, right by the current pavement, actually had little corners of 3 more pit features in them. That's probably a little bit earlier, 2,000, maybe 2,500 years old. But they're a lot less stuff in them. So probably shorter term occupation. They weren't living there as long, or weren't making as much garbage, at least. That site is potentially also eligible. Most of it appears to be protected under a layer of fill. But given that the project as designed right now doesn't have any ground disturbing activities planned there, we did not recommend any additional research. At this point, it would probably be best just to preserve and protect the site as is. Again, there's a layer of historic fill over most all of it, so it's not likely to have any extra disturbance or things like that.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah, based on what you found there, was there anything that has contributed to extending the knowledge as far as the culture and what was going on, or anything unique or anything like that?
So yeah, the ceremonial aspect I was talking about, that likely can add a great deal. At this point, we have fairly limited excavations, so saying what the potential is, I can't say exactly where it'll go, but the materials that we found it's very uncommon to find them. It's even more uncommon to find them in cases where they're not mixed up with a whole bunch of other time periods. So there's definitely information we can learn just about basic everyday life, and with that one pit in particular, we'll probably be able to learn more about some of the non-economic things people do, whether it's religious or some other social activities.
Did it seem to be a center of, central nub of the local society?
Yeah, but it's hard to say like what the scale is. So it's definitely a place where people would come and meet and gather. And I don't know if that's over a large area or if it's more like a local group, and this is the place for the local group. We don't have enough information at that point to really say how it's tied in with the overall large scale of the region yet.
And we can say that this is definitely not related to the Aztalan.
Oh, this is much
Culture.
earlier than Aztalan, yes. This Aztalan is first occupied somewhere around 1100, and we have, again, some of the stuff is probably, those elements I was talking about predate 8500, so a good 600 years previous to that.
So we shouldn't confuse the issues with the different
Yeah.
cultures.
Yeah, no, they're, yeah, I mean, some of the people at Aslan may be descendants of some of the people here, but we're talking many, many generations apart.
So we, on the west half, we moved to a phase 3.
Yes.
On the other halves, we don't need to
At
do
this
any
point,
additional work.
no, there's no need to do anything more. Oh, I did forget to mention too, we talked to the DNR today, and they talked to Fish and Wildlife, and Fish and Wildlife agreed with our suggestion that the west side go to phase 3 and the east side preserve.
So if we go to phase 3, is there any funding we can get to help with that?
No, but we are already working on the interpretive education site grants. So that would kind of go along with what ends up in the coming out of the phase 3. So it's, but no, we would probably be on the hook for the full phase 3. But because it's a much smaller site, it won't be as much as we originally anticipated either.
So how much will we have to dig as far as area goes?
That depends on a variety of things. Rob might be a little better at answering that than I would be.
Can you come up to the mic, please?
So to answer your question, typically you do a percentage of the site based on the area, like extent of it. And the agency, in this case Fish and Wildlife and DNR, will determine what the area potential effect is. And so that, then you base it off there. It's usually less than 10%. So the site's fairly large, but I think that the data recovery would be based on a much smaller area.
How deep did you go?
Well, we need to get below the historic fill to the undisturbed deposits that are there. So what, 40 centimeters? Or was it deeper than
The fill
that?
was 25 to 30
Okay.
centimeters. When we weren't finding features, we'd probably go down, I think it's 2 feet. We had one feature go down over a meter, though. So, the depth will depend on what we're finding and how deep those things go.
Did we find any artifacts on that indicate importation from other areas?
Yes, at least one of the ceramics that we have is from south of Peoria, Illinois. And that's the best example we have of long-distance trade. But this time period is usually connected with these long-distance networks.
Somebody carried their bowl a long way, huh?
Yeah.
We finding any materials, any like minerals? I'm thinking of obsidian for arrowheads or something like that.
There is a raw material type there, that Indiana hornstone or Dongolia chert, which is a gray colored chert, and that's usually from southern Illinois or Indiana. And that was part of the Hopewell kind of exchange network. That was a favored raw material. That, and with the pottery styles, the design motifs on the pottery suggest Hopewell, which is Middle Woodland. So yeah, to answer your question, there is some exotic materials. We would expect to find some more, but as Rick mentioned, we did a very small sample, but what we have gotten is pretty intriguing, to say the least.
A lot of the materials we have were local, so there's a lot of stone tools and things like that were locally produced.
So we're in phase 3, we're kind of thinking about doing like an educational something or other there.
Yeah, as part of the grants, we'll look at that as putting together some type of interpretive site so that people know what was there and what kind of culture, and we take what these guys put together and some of the artifacts that they have and put them on display, and or at least a picture or something like that, so that people understand that what was at the site.
Not being terribly facetious, but no ruins of pyramids or anything like that found.
No, we didn't go diving, so don't know yet.
Well, you never know. The lake could have been somewhere else years ago. But whatever, but no.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask this question, and it is not meant to belittle any of the work you've done, because I think you've done great work. Is there any chance some of this could have been brought in by some fill or something that happened in the past from another location, and it got dumped here by some work that had been done previous to our knowledge?
The materials that we're finding in the pits could not have been. Some of the stuff high up, there's a potential, but the main material, the stuff that we've been basing most of our conclusions on, are coming from secure contexts. So that's,
Okay,
we'd see evidence of disturbance if that were the case.
all right. Like I said, not to belittle
Not-
anything, I just had to
Understandable
ask.
question.
They actually have kind of diagrams of how the pits were at the shape and location, and you kind of get a feel for how they were dug and placed.
No, is that in?
That's all in the,
That's in the
gonna say-
it's
report.
all in the report.
I wanted to mention for the public that the But you can go to our website and to this item on the agenda and see their 134-page report. It's very comprehensive. And somebody want to say anything about that, what's in front of us now?
That is, I'll go back. That's just an example of one of the diagrams they mentioned of the pit with all the different strata. So you can, if things weren't put in, if they were put in more recently, we wouldn't have the same layering, and we'd see other signs of disturbance and things like that. But that's one of the examples of how we slowly go down and map and look at each of the layers to see what's there. This was one of the simpler ones, which is why I put it up, but we have some better examples with the historic fill above it.
Now, were some of the items you found removed and kept?
Yeah, everything we excavated is currently back at the office right now.
Okay, so if we want to do what we just talked about, we would get those items back for display.
Yes.
Yeah, they belong to you. You'll get them all back.
And we're
Whether
just,
you want to or not.
well, I think if we are going to do something educational and something that might draw people to come here to see what's here. And it's also good for our school students who study Wisconsin, and they can probably do a field trip right to our own site.
Yeah.
So with the size that we're talking about for the Phase 3, do you have an estimate of how long something like that would take?
Again, that would be, Rob would have a better idea. It really depends, though, on the total area that the Fish and Wildlife says that they want to.
Oh, okay.
And
know
then
that yet.
a little bit again on the depths of the deposit. So
Sure.
if everything happens to be as shallow as this one, we could have it done real quick. If things go deeper like a lot of our other ones, then it could take considerably longer. But no, it will, the starting point will be determining what Fish and Wildlife says we need to do, and going from there.
Fish and Wildlife contacted us, and they wanted to know our time schedule. So we'd like to bid as early as possible, obviously, because we get better bids from contractors now than we will later in the fall. But our schedule is really to start after September 1st and be done before May 30th.
So we're not talking years that we think this may take?
No.
We can,
Yeah, you're talking weeks.
Okay.
yeah, we'll have this done. We can have this done this spring. The field work.
Sure.
We're talking.
They'll be done by early
He's
May.
talking two things.
They're going to start in April, and they'll probably be done by early May. So we won't be anywhere near,
No.
Ready to do that.
no, and with 89 going, you know, and combined with what we want to be able to do at the beach, being able to start our work late in the year, having a contractor lined up but not starting until late in the year there are a lot of advantages to that construction type schedule.
Last thing is, I forget the young woman's name there, talking about taking her child down there. Would Phase 3 open up opportunities for the school to help work with you, things like their science classes? Or is that going to be something that you guys will closely monitor?
Visitors are always welcome, but when you say help work, that's a little more dicey because we need to control the data and how it recovers.
Gotcha.
But it is an opportunity for our school groups to come down, and we would be more than happy to show people around.
Yeah, see how it works.
Exactly.
Got it.
It's your heritage. And
Yep.
to take a kind of a civic pride in that, I think is really good. And we'd be more than happy to contribute to that.
And
Thanks.
I can come afterwards and give a talk at the school or the library or something like that too, if anybody wants me to. I give public talks, so I'm more than happy to share the information if you guys are willing to have and let me share that information. So
we've used Commonwealth, even before it was Commonwealth, for years to do a lot of studies here because, when we did the electric line going under the creek, we had to have an archaeological, and when we did the lead lateral services, we had to have archaeological, and they've had archaeologicals on South Main Street. You don't dig in Lake Mills without an archaeological, at least someone on site. So we're pretty used to it. And the process is consistent with what we're used to doing, and we'll work with them as close as we can, but they need to be able to produce reports that we can send in.
Sure. Would anybody be adverse? I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules. I'd like to ask you a couple questions if you'd be willing to come back up. Yeah.
I'll second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Fritsch?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Thank you for coming back up. My question was really, how was your experience? What was your experience with these folks? Were you actively involved, or were you guys just down there?
We live right near there, so we
Uh-huh.
walked over. One day we went after school, we walked over, and we saw them. They probably had like 6 people out there, maybe 5 or 6 of you, and they dig these really cool, like, I don't know, holes, and they dig them. They sift them with this big screen, and so my daughter and I were watching. We're like, this is really cool, and they said, next day we're going to do this over here, and so I pulled her out of school at lunchtime, and we went back down to the beach over lunch and had lunch, and we watched them work. We saw them find an arrowhead. We saw them find pieces of pottery, and they were nice enough we'd watch them while we were looking over their shoulders while they were doing it, and they'd point out the darker colors of dirt, which I guess is the organic matter as the item decomposes, and they explained it to us, and they would show us what they were looking at, because to me, I'm like, oh, I don't see anything, and they would show us, like, oh, that's really cool, and they would, when they found something, they would like say, come over here, and so my daughter and I would run over, and we'd look, and they'd show us what it was and explain what it was and how it was used and who it was used by. And so it was a really neat experience, and at first I felt bad pulling her out of school, but I was like, she's never gonna get this experience anywhere else. And what they're finding is so rare, and it's right in our backyard. And if we can protect it, I would love to protect it and help it stay where it is. It was a really neat experience, and they were very generous. And you and I have been emailing. He offered to come talk to the schools, so I have to get him teachers' names to see if it goes into any of the curriculum or anything. I was just talking to Robin. Aslan Society would like to probably have him come speak. So it was really neat. It was pretty cool.
So when we do phase 3, you'd recommend that we try to get the schools involved?
Yeah, we took pictures and we sent them to my daughter's teachers, and they put them up on their smart boards. And they said, hey, this is happening down at Sandy Beach. And they showed the other kids, and it was my daughter's 5th grade science class with Mrs. Kiefer. So the other kids got to see, they're like, oh, wow, that's really cool. That's happening right here in town. So,
That's the questions I had. I just
Okay.
wanted to get
Yeah.
your take on it, so I appreciate you
yeah,
coming back
no
up.
problem.
Thank you. We've suspended the rules already. Do we need to do it at all if we'd like to have Hope come up? Do we have to,
Rules are suspended.
come on up, Hope, whenever you're ready.
I appreciate you suspending the rules. My name is Hope Osdike, and I am the town chairman of the town of Lake Mills. I'm also a citizen of the community of Lake Mills. I have a couple of questions. It's apparent to me, Doug, that you have not read the report. I spent a little time on the report today, even though it's 132 pages long. It was pretty interesting. I found that the bibliography is amazing. There is a lot of reading and research that can be done just from the bibliography. I noted that there is an article in there about ice, and that's kind of contemporary for this time of the year, written by Dr. Liebenow, which was placed in the Wisconsin Archeological magazine. I didn't know it existed. I'd love to read it. So my compliments to you on the bibliography that you put together. Couple of questions that I have. First of all, I don't understand an archaeological study. I've been involved in a couple. I don't know really what Phase 1 is, what Phase 2 is, and what Phase 3 is. Could you explain that to me? Maybe I should just sum up my questions and you can go over them. I guess that's important to me, what that's all about. I understand that you're tailoring your work to apply for this Fish and Wildlife grant that has something to do with the relocation of the boat launch. I'm concerned about that. I have deep concerns about the location of the boat launch and where it is and how you have planned for it. I also have concerns. A side question, I found this word and I couldn't find it. It's called Notvina, Knotvina. Is it P? What, it's a rodent run? It was not defined on Google. I thought that was really interesting. Also, and it confounds me why we are here and why we are asking these questions. I, like these ladies, reflect the idea that there has not been enough public involvement in this. After we talk about the phases, maybe I will be more enlightened. I did read the summation on page 63 that says, should the current project plans change? What are the current project plans? I don't think we have a current project plan. I see also that in your study, you have not included any of the mobile home park. I think that is an important phase of comprehensive planning. And I think, again, I've said it several times, I think you got the cart in front of the horse. And I behoove you to go and read carefully this study. I welcome you to come and make some presentations and give this very valuable historic information to the public of our community so they can make proper decisions. I appreciate you suspending the rules this evening and allowing me to address this. Thank you for your answer.
To start with the phases at least, Phase 1 is we call a survey. We did that in July, I believe. Basically, you're looking to see, are there any archaeological resources there? We essentially went across the whole park and put in a hole in the ground about 1.5 feet wide and screened it to see if there's any materials in there. That's how we found out that there are sites there. And then, so Phase 2 is what we call an evaluation. Basically, there we're looking to see, is there integrity of the site? Is there enough material there to warrant further research? And then the Phase 3 is we call data recovery, and that is basically where you're going to try to find out as much as you can about the site based on what the project is that's going to be damaging it, so that you're called mitigation, so that whatever damage is being done is being mitigated by learning something from it. So right now with everything in the ground, we don't know anything about it, but it's protected. When we go and dig it up, we'll be destroying in the process, but we'll be learning information by doing that. So that's the Phase 1 through 3. As far as where we put our units and things like that, at this point, we're only supposed to go where the Fish and Wildlife grant is potentially going to impact it. And I don't know anything about what's happening in the trailer park area. I've only been made aware of the beach portion, so we did what was connected with the grant that required the survey and the work.
Actually, you did a little bit more because the areas that you were in on the beach weren't necessarily grant. But yes,
yeah.
you're correct.
Another question, Steve, before you let this go. Where will the copies of the study be available? Only on the website, or are there written copies?
We only have digital copies, so it's on the website. You can come up. I think it's at the library too. There's a hard copy at the library. It's To a certain extent, you commented that there's been a lot of activity on this site. It's been filled. Probably what protected the existing features, because, all over the area, there are archaeological features that have been plowed under or destroyed in other ways. The resort up on the north, on the north of the lake there, or on the north of on the river, that you used to live at,
Oh, River Bend?
Riverbend. So there's a there's a lot of things that go on. We're looking at doing a very detailed study of the site. We'll look at how we impact it and try and do as little impact as possible. We're dealing with enough fill already that we aren't, putting down asphalt, and that isn't going to be a significant impact. So from that standpoint, we probably do as much protection as the original layer has done. So from a standpoint of that, and then being able to come back in and do the interpretive education stuff and tie it in with that should provide a significant feature there that's never been there, and as part of this project, and probably protect that site for a long time.
Yeah, a layer of asphalt's usually really good at doing that.
So the Fish and Wildlife have their standards and the DNR have their standards, and if we follow those, we should be fine with all the archaeological and the state historic preservation requirements. So, I feel comfortable with where we're heading from the standpoint of history, and I can guarantee I do appreciate history.
Your comment about being willing to come and speak to the citizens here in town, given you have a better understanding of the big picture, what month or what time of year would be the best to do that?
Well, it depends on if you want me to just give a kind of general talk about the archaeology of the region, or if you want something on what we're finding.
Well, if you did the first,
If I did the first, before it warms up, or after it cools down, basically.
okay, spring or fall,
Yeah, we get pretty busy, starting April or so.
okay? And the second, what is the second?
If you want me to talk specifically about what we're finding, I could talk about what we found now, but if you wanted me to talk about the phase 3, then we'd have to see when that was done, and how long it would take me to go and process and analyze and everything before I
So
could.
that would be in fall.
Yeah, that would have to probably be fall.
That'd be the most interesting one, though, because you have the most.
Is it possible to do both? One is an overview?
I'm willing to drive out more than once, so.
Say what?
I'm willing to drive out more than once.
I'm
so.
just thinking, that maybe that would be a good thing to do, an overall kind of thing where you give, like you did here and so forth, and then one in fall that's specific to the site itself.
Yeah, I can do, I did my dissertation research down in Lake Koshkonong, so I'm very familiar with the overall prehistory of the region, so I'd be more than happy to kind of just come and give a talk about generally what happened through time and around here. And then we can come back later and talk more specifically about Lake Mills itself.
Could we tie it in with Lake Mills Aslan Historical Society one and hold it as
Yeah,
those presentations and have them in an area where we can have a group, and then they would have organizers that have a history-interested
Here.
group to start with.
However you guys want me to come out, I can do it. So if you want it to be a school thing, I can do that. If you want me to do in the evening sometime where anybody can come, or weekends, I can do that as well. So just let me know and we can coordinate, and whatever works for you guys will work. We can work something out.
If we can look into that and get back to you.
Sounds good.
Any other questions from council? Okay. Seeing none, I will thank you both for coming.
Thank you very much.
Preparing the report. Now, the report we have is a draft. When is the final one?
Actually, I gave you the draft. It's,
Oh.
they finalized it and sent it in, but it's no different. It was
Okay,
the same.
so it says draft, but it's really the same as the final?
Final.
Okay, so,
I think there might have been a couple typo corrections, but that's about it.
and there's nothing to stop someone from printing it off of the website, if you so desire?
No, or if you want the one that doesn't say draft, I can email it to you.
Okay.
Hope's got one.
Who does?
Hope.
Oh, ha! Call Hope if you want one that doesn't say draft. So,
Well, you can come here too.
Oh, okay.
It was, we were trying to get something out the door and there were a bunch of things going on. I found the draft one first and then when I
So we
remembered I
do
had to
have,
send it to
we have,
draft.
the city does have access to the final copy?
Yep.
Okay,
They're not significantly
No.
different, so.
in case it's something that is important to somebody, that they don't want the word draft on. Okay. All right, so, all right, then we'll move on to the next item on our agenda here. Hold on, I gotta get back on my thing here. Item E, 9E, Resolution 26. Would you read that resolution, please?
You want the whole thing read?
Oh, let me see. It's not very long. I think so.
Okay. Resolution 20-6, authorizing the raise and removal of Sandy Beach Restaurant. Whereas the City Council of the City of Lake Mills has previously caused an inspection of the Sandy Beach Restaurant owned by the city, and whereas the City Council has reviewed the findings of the inspection and has determined that the Sandy Beach Restaurant is old, dilapidated, out of compliance with city code, or out of repair, and consequently dangerous, unsafe, unsanitary, unfit for use as a restaurant, and that the cost of the repair of the Sandy Beach Restaurant is unreasonable. And whereas the City Council has determined that raise and removal of the Sandy Beach Restaurant with an anticipated new structure being constructed is a reasonable and appropriate action, and whereas the City Council has reviewed the options and criteria and determined that raise and removal of the Sandy Beach Restaurant is in the best interest of the citizens of the City of Lake Mills. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Lake Mills does hereby authorize the city manager to have the Sandy Beach Restaurant raised and removed.
Thank you for reading it. I think we should get a motion on the table to discuss this item.
I move Resolution 20-6.
Second.
Okay. So, now we do have a number of different reports and parts of this that go along with that idea of the resolution. Steve, are you the speaker for this, or?
Yeah, I'd be the one that reviews it.
Okay. And we do have your memo, which we all got. How would you like to proceed on this?
Well, we reviewed the history of the restaurant, so that, you know, in July of '77, so it was noted that the Lings were putting the site up for sale, or actually in January of '77, that the Lings were putting the site up for sale. Somewhere between that date and November 22nd to '77, the city had placed an option on the site. The Pier 4 Restaurant was what it was called at the time, had a significant fire in November of '77, and so it came before the council again as to how they wanted to handle that. It ended up that the restaurant had some repairs done to it. There were a lot of questions about it, so by council members and other people of the community as to the quality of the repairs, but it was repaired and determined that it was usable as a restaurant. They put it out for bid. The Moores of I think Sullivan won the bid. They ran the restaurant for quite a while. They ran it year-round. And their request was to have the restaurant made into a year-round facility. The council did spend some money on doing that, but eventually the Moores decided they would rather purchase the land than continue to lease it. They gave up their lease. Another gentleman came in, Patrick. He rented it for a short period of time. He had financial problems. The Moores came in and made another request to purchase the site. The council rejected that and sat on the restaurant for almost 2 years, 87 and 88. Finally, they put it out for bid again after they had done some work on the restaurant again and leased it out to Bob Hine, who ran it as the Sandbar. Mr. Hine ran it for 2 years and then the council transferred the lease to John Herring, who's had it since. So it's been quite a while.
1993, it says in your memo.
Yep. So we had multiple inspections starting in 2014 through 2018, including our insurance company, the fire inspector, the health inspector, and the building inspector, and all of them recommended that there be substantial amount of work being done to the site. We did some minor stuff. At this point in time, the structural problems with the building are to the point where a remodel would be as much as tearing it down and restarting, depending on what kind of structure you build. So we go through all the pros and cons of those types of questions. We look at some of the alternatives that can be used to as criteria, so space functionality, technological considerations, the physical plant, efficiencies, and health and safety concerns, and we apply those to the 3 alternatives. And based on my evaluations, I determined that it's probably the best to raise the site and start anew. Doesn't say what size building. We haven't really debated that at all. Our previous conversations related to the fact that that would be better to work with a restaurateur or someone who constructs restaurants for certain types of facilities and see what was best. But at this point in time, the existing structure probably being constructed sometime in the 30s and then going through a fire, at least one fire, and several rough years has probably lived its life and is ready for removal and looking at the other options for utilizing the site. Council has consistently talked about putting in another restaurant. I know that the plan says it's going to be one type of facility. We've never really finalized that, but at this point in time, raising the existing building is, in my opinion, the best option.
Can you mention the discussion that's kind of come out of the ground of the food trucks?
Well, we're looking at alternative options while we don't have a building. And so there were several options talked about. I don't want to, I mean, those are staff level options. We're throwing out there, what can we do at what level and what's going to work and what's not going to work. As far as what you guys have done is said, yeah, we'll listen to you when you put something together. Well, we're not quite there yet. We'd like to have a few more conversations. We'd like to be able to have something ready to go by May 30th of this year. But there are several other features that go along with that too. You know, we have to put, if you go ahead and approve this resolution, we have to put out an RFP. You saw the environmental report. There's a lot of asbestos in there, so we're going to have to go through the asbestos process and then have that taken care of and then have the building removed. So from that, we're having to look at, you know, how are we resetting the fence? Are we grading and seeding that site? Are we putting down a gravel pad so that we can have food trucks there? So those are some of the conversations we're still trying to work through. If we leave if we do a more temporary fence fix and we can pull the trucks up to the fence, that changes the whole perspective of how we're going to grade and seed, or if we're going to put down a gravel pad. We have to change the water. We have to figure out, what we're doing with a big check. So those are conversations we want to finalize and kind of have some conversations with you before we get too far into that. But those are some of the conversations that we're trying to work through.
Some of the other things to just make sure that they're mentioned out there is when the Herrings left, they came back and they were able to take all of their stuff out of there. So right now, there is nothing in there as far as refrigeration, cooling, food prep, nothing.
Tables, chairs.
Tables, chairs.
The deck.
The deck, they took the deck with them. The tap lines were all left open for all the different beer and soda and stuff, so all that stuff is ruined now too, so it would take a lot to even try to think about putting somebody back in there. You'd have to have somebody that's gonna have a long-term lease to be able to outfit that whole environment back up and try to bring somebody back in there, so it's better.
If you put the new modern equipment in there that you need, that floor isn't gonna hold it.
Yeah, well, that too.
Yeah, we wouldn't. It would take so much money to bring that up to code that it's more expensive than raising it and doing something new. And then at least we'd have something new to go from here to the future. So. Anybody have more questions?
Is there a reason that the decision has to be made now to raise it? Can it be delayed a few months?
Yes. We were kind of instructed at one point in time that we wanted to get on this time schedule. So we're functioning at a council directive, not a timeline that's set by us.
A directive that was done in an open meeting?
Conversation was in closed session. Yeah, it was in closed session.
So the public wasn't really aware of any of those discussions?
No, they were not aware of the timeline.
So if we delayed this at least another meeting, it would give the public an opportunity, now that they know what these reports are, to at least weigh in as to how their feelings are about the decision. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the decision. I'm just saying that it might be prudent to let the public be aware of all of the information before a decision is made.
That is not my decision, that's yours. So if you guys want to, if I was just complying with, what I had been told.
Well, we do have some safety concerns too, that the building could easily attract vandals, since it's really not well secured at this point, I don't believe.
Is it anything less well secured than it is any other winter? It usually sits there vacant all winter long. So, well, have we already got a motion on this?
Yes,
We do.
Okay, I move that we table this for future discussion at another meeting.
Do you want to table it to the next meeting?
Indefinitely, but we could make it be a table to the next meeting.
I think one of the concerns I would have by tabling it too long is if we're going to do this, we need to do it, and then we need to get our food truck people lined up and so forth, but they need lead time too for me.
But it's January, so if we table it at least till the first meeting in February, I'm not sure we've
No,
really harmed ourselves at all.
Depends on your timeline to get in there for the hazardous material, the asbestos
The asbestos
abatement.
and-
Get all that stuff situated before you raise it. You're going to want to do that before the busy summer season starts, before you have issues with people down there during that demolition. It just depends. How far out it's going to take you to get everything all lined up. Get bids on stuff.
Because we have to go through the RFP process, it'll take a
Correct.
while.
That's going to take you probably a couple months just to get that done.
Well, you can be preparing RFPs pending a resolution on when we're going to tear it down.
And we have been preparing that, so it's kind of in place, but we need to get permission to advertise. So if you're not going to tear down the building, we can't advertise, so then we got to get it in the paper, get our advertisement times out, get our bids back.
Well, I move that we table this until our next regular meeting.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of a second. Okay, so we're on the original motion. So the timeline that you're looking at, Steve, is, well, you've got, like you said, do we already know what our, what issues we have with asbestos and stuff?
The report was included in your packet.
Yeah, I didn't read that part specifically, but I was wondering, do we know, is it a big project or is it a,
The building is small, so for the size of the building, it's about average. But it's like windows, caulk, roofing, tile.
yeah, the floor tiles?
So it's pretty common with the construction that's in there. You got your vinyl base, carpet mastic. So it's,
So it is going to take some time to do the abatement of the asbestos.
no, I don't think so.
Oh, you don't think so?
I think once it's all done, and, probably 3 days?
Oh, okay. I was thinking months, so.
The toughest part is getting in and getting all the equipment set up for the asbestos, because once they're in there and they're tearing it down, you gotta kind of keep yourself in a vacuum, but once that's done, tearing out all the other stuff is pretty simple.
You spend a lot more time on paperwork than you do working.
Yeah. There's a lot of paperwork. When they get done and you got all the paperwork, they will get its mounds for the amount of work. Because you have to file that with a landfill company.
Correct, yeah, it'll have to go to a certified landfill. They have to give their notices in advance, and yeah, it's a process.
So that's where the time is.
Right, it's in all the process, the paperwork up front.
Okay, that helps me. I didn't have a good understanding of that.
The work itself is actually the easy part.
Don't tell the workers that.
Well, everything is, we aren't saying it's easy, we're
Yeah,
just
I
saying
know.
it's easier than time-wise. Well, I don't see there's any question that this needs to come down. I could not in good conscience vote to keep it and fix it, because I wouldn't do that with a house of this nature. I wouldn't buy a house that looks like this and put money in it. So I certainly am not going to personally spend city money to fix a building that just had its lifetime. So I don't think it's a big question from my point personally about whether or not to raise it. I think it needs to be raised. And then we'll have to decide where we go from there. But in the meantime, we'll have food trucks to provide food for people this coming season. And by then, we should know something for next year. May not be a building, because if we're building something, it won't be ready for the next year either. So we'd be doing food trucks for a couple years. But, and maybe we'll come up with a better idea than food trucks, but that's the idea I've heard. So I'm just speaking for myself at this moment. Anybody else wish to, comment on this item, or we can call the roll? Sounds like we call the roll.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Fritsch?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
No.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Motion passed 4-1.
Okay, so what happens next, Steve?
Well, we'll have to start preparing things, but
Will it something
next is the,
come back
this
to
is-
the council at the next meeting?
yep,
Okay, then we will see that on the agenda for the next meeting, on some shape and form.
some shape or form.
Okay. That takes care of item E. Takes us to item F, Ordinance 1210, amending the City Code, Chapter 279. Would you read the rest of that, or will you read the ordinance thing for me, please?
Ordinance 1210, amending City Code, Chapter 279, Building Construction, Article 3, Electrical Code, Section 279-34, Adoption of Code Standards.
Okay. We had the first reading at the last meeting. Do we have any changes for this, or it's just going to continue? Okay, so this serves as second reading. Okay. And that takes us to recommendations for future agendas. We just stated that we will have something about the sandbar at the next meeting. Do we have anything else that has to be on the next meeting? Or that we should expect at the next meeting, Steve? No, not at this point.
Not at this point that we know of.
Okay. There'll be something. We just don't know what it is yet. Okay. Well, would you read item 11, please?
Convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 1985, Sub 1E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. And Section 1985, Sub 1C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility.
Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Fritsch?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
And we will be meeting in closed session, and then we will reconvene and adjourn, but we will not be back on TV for that. So. Okay.